Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. We're going to kick off. I'm Spencer. I'm chairman of the Harvard Club, and have the pleasure of introducing Jen Burns, our speaker tonight. So Jen was a Harvard College class of '98, where she majored in history, or concentrated in history, as I say. She then got her PhD at Berkeley in '05, and during that period was an active member of the Harvard Club, so some of you may recognize her from events if you've been in the club a few years. And now she's an assistant professor at UVA, and this book on Ayn Rand is her first book, and it's available for sale and signing after the talk. So over to Jen.
Thank you. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you all for coming out. Spencer said I was quite the denizen of the Harvard Club in my San Francisco days, and it's so nice to be here, sort of at the heart of an event. Can you hear me in the back, or should I speak louder? You can all hear me well? Okay, great. Normally when I start talking, the first thing I do is sort of clarify a key piece of information about my topic, which is the correct pronunciation of my subject. But Spencer got it right. I think you are the only MC who's ever pronounced it correctly. It is, in fact, I learned in the course of my research, Ayn Rand. You will hear many permutations on this. The trick I tell people how to remember the correct pronunciation is that, in keeping with her philosophy, the correct pronunciation of her name rhymes with the word mine. So keep that in mind and spread the word, and maybe this book will turn the tide of mispronunciation. So you may know Ayn Rand as a cheesy novelist beloved primarily by adolescents. Now, there's a grain of truth in that stereotype, but what I argue in my book, Goddess of the Market, is that instead we should consider Rand the ultimate gateway drug to life on the right. Now, in the book, I focus on two facets of her thought that have made her perennially appealing to those on the political right. The first is her belief in limited, minimal government. The second is her defense of free market capitalism. And over the course of her career, Rand braided these two ideas together into an individualistic philosophy that resonated deeply with American traditions of limited government, of individualism, and of capitalism. Now, Rand was also an atheist. I'll say a little bit about this later in my talk. But that's significant because I don't call Rand a conservative because she's an atheist. Conservatives tend to consider religion and faith in God as of primary importance to society. And since Rand was an atheist and a very outspoken one, I categorize her in the broader field of the American right. I mean, she shares this belief in limited government, in pro-capitalism, but she's not a conservative because she's missing this religious piece. So what I do in my book is I describe the story of Rand's life, the evolution and development of her major ideas, and I also try to explain why people were drawn to her and what were the consequences or the significance of the avid following she inspired. And what started me on this project were really a series of questions about who is Ayn Rand and where does she fit with traditions of American thought or American politics. How do we relate her to what else was happening around her in her lifetime, and what is her enduring significance to American history? So to excavate these questions, I started this project 8 years ago when I was doing my doctorate at Berkeley, and I relied on research in her personal papers, in her archives. And so this material, I'm the only writer on Rand who's had access to this material and has written a book based upon it. I spent years working in these papers, looking at things like unpublished letters, diary entries, journals, drafts of her work, letters from fans, all this type of material. And I use these in the book to sort of flesh out the impact she had on others and explore the hidden dimensions of her thought. Now, you may know that for many people, reading Rand can be a transformative experience. People often say it changed their life. They often go into a sort of Ayn Rand phase where they become completely obsessed with her works. There's a sort of feverish intensity to the experience of reading Rand for many. So for example, here's a letter that Rand received from a young reader, and I quote from this letter in my book, and the reader writes to her, quote, "About a month ago, I noticed how much I was talking about your books to my teachers and classmates. As a result of my enthusiasm, I have lost 2 friends. I am beginning to realize how unimportant these people are." So readers like this might have this type of intense encounter with Rand and then eventually move on from her, pick up other readers, decide that maybe she's not as important as they once thought she was. But what remains with them is her ideas about government, her ideas about capitalism, about individualism, and political freedom. And as I show in the book, she's over time become part of American political culture. She's become part of the way we understand our world, part of the way we think about markets, about capitalism, about morality, about the proper role of the state. So let me just back up and start with a basic question. Who is Ayn Rand? She was born Elisa Rosenbaum in 1905 in Petrograd, Russia. And when she was 12 years old, she lived through the Russian Revolution. And this was an experience that had a deep impact on her. And I'm going to read now the opening paragraph of my book where I describe these events. "It was a wintry day in 1918 when the Red Guard pounded on the door of Zinovy Rosenbaum's chemistry shop. The guards bore a seal of the state of Russia, which they nailed upon the door, signaling that it had been seized in the name of the people. Zinovy could at least be thankful the mad whirl of revolution had taken only his property, not his life. But his eldest daughter, Elisa, 12 at the time, burned with indignation. The shop was her father's. He had worked for it, studied long hours at university, dispensed valued advice and medicines to his customers. Now in an instant it was gone, taken to benefit nameless, faceless peasants, strangers who could offer her father nothing in return. The soldiers had come in boots, carrying guns, making clear that resistance would mean death. Yet they had spoken the language of fairness and equality, their goal to build a better society for all. Watching, listening, absorbing, Elisa knew one thing for certain. Those who invoked such lofty ideals were not to be trusted. Talk about helping others was only a thin cover for force and power. It was a lesson she would never forget. So from this moment on, for the next 10 years, her family, which had been a rather affluent, upper middle class family, eked out an existence, living in poverty, barely surviving during the turmoil of the revolutionary era. And by the time she was 21, Elisa had enough, and she knew she had to get out of there. So she convinced her family she had to leave. She convinced her parents to write to distant relatives in the United States and ask them to sponsor her for a visit to the United States that she knew would be permanent.